The ultrasound showed nothing, just empty darkness where his son should have been. Daniel Chen's chest tightened as Dr. Morrison moved the probe across his brother's swollen belly again, paler with every pass. Just yesterday, the heartbeat was strong. The measurements were perfect. But now, nothing. Still heavy. Still shifting with what he swore were kicks. But on the screen, shadows. "Where is my son?" Daniel whispered, his voice cracking. His brother's hands trembled against his round stomach. And for the first time in 30 years of practice, Dr. Morrison had no answer, because Milbrook Hollow was no ordinary town. In this valley, pregnancies vanished overnight, babies never born, and fathers watched their sons disappear into the dark. Daniel thought he was just moving here to start a new life. But what waited for him in West Virginia wasn't a fresh beginning. It was an ancient nightmare. Before we dive into this chilling story, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and share if you enjoy deep dive documentaries that uncover the most unsettling mysteries. Your support helps bring more of these stories to life, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The moving truck growled as it braked, hissing like a wounded beast. Daniel Chen pressed his forehead to the window, gazing out at the coal town nestled in a valley that felt too quiet. His brother, David, killed the engine and forced a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome home for the next 2 years," he muttered. His voice carried false hope, heavy with what neither believed. Houses leaned like tired men, their paint peeling, roofs sagging. Smoke curled from the mines in the distance, stretching into the autumn sky like blackened fingers. Daniel's gut twisted. This didn't feel right already. Their rented 2-story colonial stood behind a picket fence worn by decades of rain. White walls dulled to gray, shutters clinging loosely. From afar, it seemed normal. Up close, Daniel felt watched, as if the house breathed. The air carried something metallic, sharp on his tongue. David patted his shoulder. 2 years of this, brother. Then we leave. Mining certificate in hand, pockets heavier, future brighter. The reassurance felt more like a plea. As they unloaded boxes, Daniel noticed pale faces in windows. Silent men watched from behind curtains, their expressions unreadable. Every pair of eyes followed them like predators tracking prey, without a word spoken. "Friendly neighborhood," David whispered dryly, lifting another box. Daniel smirked, though unease gnawed his insides. This wasn't curiosity. This was ownership. These men weren't welcoming neighbors. They were gatekeepers guarding something ancient beneath the valley. A voice startled them from behind. "Welcome, lads." An elderly man stood at their boundary, shoulders stooped but presence heavy. His eyes, icy blue, piercing, seemed to cut straight through Daniel's chest, down to his unborn son. "I'm Marcus Hollow," the man said, extending a skeletal hand. His grip was colder than autumn air, lingering longer than politeness allowed. He didn't look at Daniel's face. His gaze locked firmly on his rounded belly. "You're carrying," Marcus murmured softly, almost reverently. "How marvelous." His lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I've seen many sons born in this valley. Some grew strong, others disappeared." His voice lingered on, vanished. Daniel instinctively wrapped an arm around his stomach, as if shielding the life inside from that penetrating stare. David stepped forward, chest squared. "We'll handle ourselves, sir. Appreciate the welcome, but we've got unpacking." Marcus chuckled dryly. Of course. Just know, young man, the Hollow has its ways. Not every hunger is of the stomach." He winked before gliding back across the yard, shadow trailing unnaturally long behind him. Daniel shivered. That night, lying on a mattress surrounded by half-opened boxes, he stared at Marcus's darkened house across the street. Only one window glowed faintly, its flickering light like a candle resisting the abyss. "Think he knew about the baby too quick?" Daniel asked. David, half asleep, mumbled, "Some old men have instincts." But Daniel couldn't forget the hunger in Marcus's gaze. Not curiosity, ownership, as if his son already belonged. Shadows stretched across the room, whispering against the walls. Daniel's hand rested on his belly, feeling faint kicks that should have comforted him. Instead, they felt claimed, as if the hollow itself already fed from inside. At dawn, he found a dish on the porch. A note lay atop it. For the expecting father. Eat every bite. Milbrook Hollow. Steam rose from the stew, its aroma rich, intoxicating, almost alive. Hunger gnawed at Daniel worse than morning sickness ever had. Against his better judgment, he ate until the bowl was scraped clean. Moments later, warmth surged through him, his stomach tightening strangely, growth accelerating faster than natural law. Through the kitchen window, Marcus appeared, smiling faintly. He pressed his palm to the glass of his own home, mouthing words Daniel couldn't hear but somehow understood. Growing strong. A chill crawled his spine. The hollow was feeding. That evening, as the valley's silence pressed heavy against the house, Daniel realized something terrifying. He hadn't moved into Milbrook Hollow. He had been delivered to it, another vessel in a cycle older than he could imagine. The third morning in Milbrook Hollow began with soft knocking at the front door. Daniel shuffled downstairs, robes straining across his expanding stomach, already larger than it should have been at that stage. Through frosted glass, he recognized Marcus Hollow's silhouette. The old man held another covered dish, motionless, waiting with patience that felt less like courtesy and more like inevitability. Daniel's pulse quickened, his hands trembling on the doorknob. "Good morning, lad," Marcus said warmly, though his icy stare betrayed something hungrier. His gaze slid instantly to Daniel's swollen midsection, a flicker of satisfaction curling his lips. "You're carrying magnificently, stronger than I'd anticipated already." Daniel stepped back defensively. "It's early. Too early." Marcus simply held out the dish. Herbal bread, tea from the valley. Generations of hollow men thrived on it. Keeps sons safe from influences. That last word dripped with unspoken menace. Hunger surged again inside Daniel, gnawing at his restraint. Against better judgment, he accepted the offering, scent overwhelming his senses. Marcus stepped inside uninvited, settling at the kitchen table with unnatural grace, hands folded like a priest awaiting confession. The bread tasted unlike anything Daniel had eaten, dark, rich, primal. Flavors filled his mouth with earthy weight, every bite fusing into him. Marcus watched with sharp delight, eyes never leaving Daniel's throat as he swallowed. "You've a fine appetite," Marcus murmured approvingly. "That's good. Too many fathers starve their sons before birth, and the valley takes what it's owed regardless. But you're nourishing properly." His pale eyes gleamed with unnatural pride. Daniel froze mid-bite. "Other fathers?" Marcus leaned back, smile thinning. "Yes, many before you. Strong men, all expecting sons, their pregnancies ending with nothing. No cries, no children, only empty rooms and hollowed hearts." The words chilled him. "What do you mean?" "Nothing." Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. 7 fathers in 18 months, all carrying healthy sons one day, empty the next. Doctors baffled. The hollow never starves." Daniel pushed the bread away, suddenly nauseated. "That's impossible." Marcus's expression hardened, revealing something sharper beneath the grandfatherly facade. "Impossible is just what men call truths they fear. The hollow feeds. Always has. Always will. We simply provide nourishment." Daniel staggered to his feet. "Get out." Marcus rose slowly, his shadow lagging unnaturally behind. You'll understand soon enough. You're changing already, aren't you? Growing too quickly, feeling movements far too early. The hollow has claimed you, Daniel's arms wrapped protectively over his stomach. He whispered, "What did you put in the food?" Marcus's teeth gleamed faintly in the dim kitchen light. "Protection, lad. Insurance. So the hollow doesn't swallow your son whole." When Marcus finally left, Daniel collapsed against the counter, sweat chilling his neck. The warmth from the bread still coursed through him, muscles tightening, belly heavier. He could feel something inside pressing for space. Too alive. Too demanding. He dialed Dr. Morrison in Beckley, begging for an urgent appointment. By the time he arrived, he looked nearly double his term. Yet the ultrasound revealed a perfectly normal fetus, small, calm, impossibly unaware of the chaos outside. "Everything's fine," Dr. Morrison said kindly. But Daniel knew better. Strangers at gas stations stared, asking when he was due, as if his son would arrive tomorrow. Yet the screen showed months still ahead. Reality itself twisted in Milbrook Hollow. Driving home through mountain roads, Daniel's belly shifted violently, as if something more than one heartbeat pulsed beneath. Panic clawed his throat. If the doctors couldn't see it, then Marcus was right. The hollow was feeding something unseen. By the time Daniel pulled into the driveway, dusk hung heavy. Marcus stood across the yard, watching silently, his blue eyes gleaming like lanterns. He raised a hand, mouthing words Daniel understood without hearing. "Growing strong." That night, Daniel lay awake, one hand over his swollen stomach, the other clutching his brother's arm. Shadows stretched long across the walls, whispering in patterns. He realized with horror, Marcus wasn't just a neighbor, he was a warden. The following morning, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, untouched breakfast before him. His stomach tightened unnaturally, as though something inside demanded more than food. Every kick, every shift, felt more urgent than it should. David returned from the mine orientation, dust still clinging to his boots. He frowned at Daniel's pale face and the untouched plate. "You didn't eat?" Daniel shook his head. "Not hungry for food, hungry for something else." Later that afternoon, Daniel walked into town, searching for clarity. He stopped at the small diner, ordering tea but ignoring the steaming mug. Conversations quieted when he entered, every man's eyes sliding toward his swollen belly. One approached, weathered hands gripping a mug too tightly. "You're carrying?" he asked cautiously. Daniel nodded. The man's eyes darkened. "Leave before it's too late. Sons vanish here. One day you feel them kicking, next day nothing." Daniel leaned forward. "What do you mean, vanish?" The man lowered his voice. 7 of us in less than 2 years. Strong sons growing inside us, then gone without reason. Empty wombs, no trace, only grief. Another man joined, sleeves rolled high, scars across his knuckles. Doctors call it anomalies. They don't see the truth. The hollow takes what it wants. No man here has kept his son. His jaw tightened. Daniel's throat went dry. "Marcus said the hollow feeds." Both men exchanged haunted looks. One whispered, "He would know." His line kept the covenant. His eyes, "You've seen them. He's not just old, he's part of it." They fell silent as Marcus entered the diner, his presence like a winter draft cutting through the room. He nodded at Daniel, pale eyes gleaming, before settling at the counter without ordering. The men beside Daniel stood abruptly, muttering excuses, leaving bills on the table. Daniel remained, heart racing. Marcus turned slightly, smiling faintly. "Enjoying your tea, lad? The hollow provides strength if you're willing." His tone carried certainty. Daniel pushed the mug aside. "Strength or chains?" Marcus chuckled. "Depends which you prefer. Chains for some, ascension for others. Sons vanish for those who resist. But those who surrender, They carry bridges instead of children. The words gnawed at him. Later that night, Daniel dreamt of bridges stretching across black mountains, built not of stone but flesh. His son wasn't kicking anymore. He was building something inside, something older than human memory. When Daniel woke, sweat drenched his chest. He pressed a hand to his stomach. Silence. No kicks. Panic surged. He shook David awake. He stopped. I can't feel him. He's gone. His voice cracked. David gripped his brother's shoulders. Easy. It's probably nothing. But the fear in his eyes betrayed doubt. They drove to Beckley at dawn. Another ultrasound. The screen glowed with a normal fetus, heartbeat strong. Dr. Morrison insisted nothing was wrong. Yet Daniel left more unsettled. The kicks he once felt had transformed. No gentle life stirring, only deep shifting, like tectonic plates grinding beneath mountains. Something alive, but not his son alone. Driving home, every bend in the road seemed alive with whispering trees. Shadows leaned inward. He swore the forest murmured his name. By the time they reached Milbrook Hollow, Daniel was certain his son was no longer only his. That evening, knocks rattled the door. Marcus entered with another dish, uninvited as always. Eat, lad, he urged. Without nourishment, the hollow takes fully. At least with me, you keep part of him. His smile chilled. Daniel refused. I won't be part of your covenant. Marcus's eyes gleamed dangerously. You already are. The moment you ate my bread, you opened the gate. Your son isn't just yours anymore. He belongs to the hollow. Daniel stood firm, chest heaving. Then I'll fight it. Marcus leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. Fight all you like. The hollow doesn't lose. Ask the other fathers. They're buried beneath this valley, vessels emptied long ago. When the door closed behind him, Daniel felt a weight heavier than any pregnancy pressing down. The truth was unavoidable. Milbrook Hollow wasn't stealing sons randomly. It was cultivating them, and he was next in line. The night after Marcus's warning, Daniel sat by the window, staring into the valley's blackness. The silence pressed against the glass, heavier than air, as if the mountains themselves held their breath, waiting. Shadows moved along the street, men, pale-eyed, marching in strange unison, their steps almost synchronized. Daniel recognized faces from the diner, from the mine. They no longer looked like neighbors. They looked like keepers of something ancient. David returned late, shoulders stiff, dirt caked on his clothes. He noticed the watchers, too, their eyes glowing faintly like embers in the dark. What the hell's happening here? He whispered, voice trembling. Daniel offered no answer. At midnight, heavy knocking shook the front door. When opened, Marcus stood there, flanked by 3 silent men. He held no food this time, only a small iron-bound box that reeked of damp earth. Time you understood, Marcus said, stepping inside uninvited. He set the box upon the table, unlatched it slowly. Inside lay blackened stones etched with symbols that pulsed faintly, as if veins carried unseen life within. This valley thrives because of covenant, Marcus explained, pale eyes unblinking. Long before miners arrived, long before towns rose, the hollow fed on us. Men carrying sons became offerings. Without sacrifice, no one survived these mountains. David frowned. Sacrifice? You mean murder? Marcus shook his head. Not murder. Exchange. The hollow hungers. But we learn to bargain. Feed it vessels willingly, and in return it spares the rest. My family sealed this pact. Daniel clenched his fists. And what happens to the sons? Marcus smiled faintly. They become bridges, not merely children, connections between worlds. They carry knowledge, strength, hunger. They are born not to live as men, but to feed eternity. Daniel recoiled. You're saying every vanished son became fuel for something older? Marcus nodded solemnly. Older than language, older than stone. Without them, this valley dies. With them, it endures. You are chosen, lad. You carry purpose. David slammed the table. You're insane. He's my brother. That's his child, not your offering. Marcus's eyes glinted, more inhuman than human. It's not his alone. The moment he consumed my bread, the covenant bound him. Daniel's breath quickened. So I never had a choice? Marcus leaned closer. Choice is an illusion. The hollow selects who will carry. It always has. You only decide how much of yourself you'll keep when it claims your son. The room felt smaller, air thick. Daniel touched his stomach. His son shifted violently, stronger than ever. He felt like stone grinding against stone inside, building pressure unbearable. He whispered, He's not just mine anymore, is he? Marcus straightened, hands resting on the box of etched stones. No, lad. He's ours. He's the Hollow's, a bridge ready to cross. You're not losing him. You're giving him to something greater than yourself. Daniel's voice cracked. And what do I get in return? Marcus smiled coldly. You survive. Unlike the fathers who fought, unlike those buried nameless in the mountains. Fight, and the Hollow devours everything. Surrender, and part of him remains. David pulled Daniel close, whispering fiercely, Don't listen! He's poisoning you! We'll leave! We'll run tonight! But Daniel shook his head slowly, dread hollowing his chest. Wherever we go, the Hollow follows. It doesn't stop at the valley's edge. Marcus lifted the box, shadows clinging unnaturally to his fingers. Tonight, the covenant renews. Tonight, you'll choose. Resist and be emptied, or surrender and carry a bridge that endures. Either way, the Hollow feeds. He departed into darkness. When the door shut, silence returned heavier than before. Daniel stared at his swollen belly, movement relentless within. He realized the Hollow wasn't waiting for choice. It was already feeding, already building. The covenant lived inside him now. Through the window, Marcus stood at his porch, pale eyes glowing faintly in the dark. His lips moved without sound, yet Daniel understood perfectly. The words weren't spoken. They were branded into his mind. The bridge will be born. Night fell heavy, thicker than coal smoke, pressing against the Chen house like a living weight. Daniel lay doubled over, stomach stretched beyond reason, contractions tearing through him, though months remained on the medical calendar. David knelt beside him, gripping his trembling shoulders. This isn't possible, he muttered, eyes darting between his brother's distorted belly and the window where pale shadows shifted. He's not ready. He shouldn't even exist yet. Daniel gasped, sweat pouring down his face. He's coming, David. I can't stop him. The Hollow wants him now. Each word shivered through the room like wind through rusted pipes, ancient and demanding. Shadows slid beneath the doorframe, stretching across the floor like fingers. Marcus entered without knocking, pale eyes burning. Behind him stood the men of Milbrook Hollow, silent, synchronized, their presence heavier than the mountains surrounding them. It's time, Marcus said softly, reverently. He approached Daniel's side, placing a skeletal hand upon the swollen curve. The bridge is ready. He stirs to cross, and you will deliver greatness. David lunged forward, fury blazing. Stay away from him! But the gathered men blocked his path, their movements calm yet immovable, as though each carried the weight of centuries. Resistance felt like striking stone with bare fists. Daniel cried out, body convulsing, contractions racking him with unnatural strength. The air shimmered with energy, rattling the walls, bending the lights. It wasn't labor. It was summoning, a tearing of flesh and reality at once. Marcus whispered chants in a tongue no human throat should speak, voice harmonizing with unseen echoes. The symbols carved into the stones glowed faintly, casting eerie light across Daniel's strained face as his body shuddered. Something pressed outward beneath Daniel's skin, stretching tight as drums. A shape emerged, unnatural in its force, pushing downward. His screams filled the room, raw, primal, blending with the chanting into a symphony of horror. David's eyes flooded with terror. "He's killing him!" Marcus turned, voice calm. "He's remaking him. The bridge isn't death, it's transformation. You'll understand when you see." His smile was almost tender, but his eyes burned predatory. The final contraction tore through Daniel like lightning. His body arched violently, a scream ripping from his throat as the air itself fractured. Darkness spilled onto the sheets, fluid not clear, but shadow alive with motion. From that darkness, the child emerged. Not crying, not weak, but silent and steady. Skin translucent, veins glowing faintly, eyes pale blue like Marcus's, yet deeper, ancient, beyond comprehension. He looked at Daniel and David with knowing. Daniel collapsed back, chest heaving, face pale but strangely serene. "He's here," he whispered. "My son, my bridge." His words trembled with both awe and dread, like a man witnessing divinity in monstrous form. Marcus lifted the newborn carefully, though the infant seemed far older than moments. Shadows clung to its body like a second skin. "Perfect," Marcus breathed. "The Hollow has waited generations for this vessel. At last he lives." David staggered back, shaking his head. "That's not a child. That's not human." But the bridge turned its glowing eyes upon him, lips curling faintly into something that almost resembled a smile. "Father," it said, voice echoing his own. The room froze. Daniel sobbed both joy and terror in equal measure. David recoiled, bile rising. The word wasn't spoken, it was pressed into his mind, forcing recognition. Somehow, impossibly, the creature bore his essence too. Marcus raised the child toward the ceiling. "Witness the covenant renewed." The gathered men bowed their heads, chanting in unison. Power pulsed through the floor, shaking walls, rattling glass. The bridge's existence rewrote reality line by line. Daniel's hand reached out weakly, trembling. "Don't take him." "Not completely." Marcus leaned down, placing the child upon his chest. "He is yours. Yet not. He belongs to the Hollow, but his flesh remembers you." David turned to the window, horrified. Outside, the valley stirred. Shadows walked through streets, men swaying in perfect unison, all pale-eyed, all whispering one word carried on the wind. Bridge. The Hollow had claimed its heir. In that moment, Daniel realized the truth. His son was never his to keep. He was a doorway, not a destination, a vessel through which the hunger of mountains would spread beyond Milbrook Hollow forever. 6 months after the night of the bridge's birth, Milbrook Hollow seemed unchanged on the surface. Miners worked, men drank at the diner, streets lay quiet. But beneath, something older moved with growing purpose. Daniel walked among them, paler now, eyes faintly glowing, belly flat once more. He felt empty, yet strangely whole. His son lived, not beside him but everywhere, pulsing through the valley's veins like breath. David remained haunted, mind fractured by what he had witnessed. The bridge had spoken with his voice, recognized him as father. He carried that weight like chains, every echo reminding him of blood shared. The men of the Hollow had changed too. Their eyes carried unnatural calm, their movements synchronized. They whispered in unison when no outsider listened, voices layered like distant chants reverberating through stone. The town pulsed with ritual. Outsiders who passed through felt it without knowing. An unease, a pressure behind the eyes. Some turned back before unpacking. Others stayed, unaware they'd stepped into a living covenant that harvested its chosen silently. One evening, Daniel stood at the diner, overhearing new arrivals. A young miner laughed nervously, telling his brother, "This valley feels strange, like the mountains watch." Daniel lowered his gaze. The Hollow had already chosen them. Marcus sat nearby, sipping black tea, pale eyes never blinking. He spoke softly, though his words carried across the room. The family grows, bridges spread, sons will not vanish, they will anchor the hunger. The bridge itself was no longer an infant. It appeared as a boy now, walking the streets at dusk, hand in Marcus's, though his face shifted strangely. Sometimes Daniel's features, sometimes David's, sometimes something older. When he spoke, his words bent air. Miners paused mid-step, listening without reason. He whispered promises of strength, survival, endurance. And each man who heard felt compelled, bowing heads instinctively, revering the child as priest. David followed him once, down into the abandoned shafts where coal seams split into caverns. There he saw shadows bending to the boy, writhing in worship. The bridge smiled, whispering, "Soon, beyond these mountains." The spreading began subtly. Men from Hollow families traveled to cities carrying gifts of bread and broth. Expectant fathers accepted offerings gratefully, unaware of what they consumed. Soon after, their sons grew too fast, movements unnatural. Daniel heard whispers from beyond the valley, towns reporting impossible pregnancies, doctors baffled. He knew the pattern, yet said nothing. His silence was complicity, but he could not betray the blood of his bridge-born son. The covenant expanded outward like veins across a map. Marcus called it harvest. "For centuries we fed the Hollow from one valley," he explained. "Now bridges walk among men carrying hunger across borders, across oceans." David resisted longer, but resistance was erosion against tides. Dreams consumed him. Bridges stretching into cities, sons born glowing, chanting unison across skylines. He woke each night screaming until pale eyes opened in his reflection too. In Chicago, in Pittsburgh, in Portland, men spoke of neighbors offering strange meals, of sons growing impossibly. Investigations began, but nothing stuck. Records blurred, witnesses vanished. The Hollow erased itself even as it spread. Daniel stood one night on his porch, staring at Marcus and the bridge silhouetted against moonlight. The boy's eyes glowed brighter than stars. For the first time, Daniel bowed willingly. His son was no longer his. Across the world, sons were being claimed. Across the world, bridges were being built. The Hollow's hunger had left Milbrook Valley, wearing familiar faces, speaking trusted voices, offering nourishment. By the time men realized, it was unstoppable. The covenant was complete. The harvest had begun. Humanity's role had shifted forever. No longer builders, no longer fathers. They were vessels, feeding an ancient hunger that smiled with their own sons' faces. And none could stop it.